Well, listeners, as I was mentioning in the intro, we have a real treat today. My friend and colleague Jeremy Hirsch is joining us, and I've gotten into more details, Jeremy. But you heading up franchise and multi-unit services for Houlihan and Lokey, which, for those that might not know, is the number one M&A transaction firm in the United States for the past decade. And so I've seen you at the conferences. I saw you on stage this year at HFA, Jeremy. I always see you working the convention floor and meeting with all the important people at the show. I really appreciate you making time out of New York. How you doing?
Hey, I'm just I'm happy to be here, and I'm honored to be on and having a coffee chat with a friend.
Well, that's very nice, Jeremy. And Jeremy's team, I can't say enough about Jeremy, and I had the pleasure of working with their team on a financing a little over a year ago. They did a great job, and Jeremy, you'll find out about his background. He's a great person to know. So I always like to ask guests like you, how did you get into investment banking, and how did you find your way? I know you have a background in fitness, but how did you find your way to where you are now, doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, look, to be honest with you, I kind of got into investment banking by default. When I grew up in New York City, and when I was in college, it seemed that all my friends were getting investment banking internships, and I kind of felt left out, and was saying, hey, well, what's going on here? And so I really did everything that I could to get an internship. And so I started out my career at a firm called Rothschild, which is primarily a European investment bank, and spent a bunch of time there. But kind of after that, I worked for a private equity fund, and then I went off on my own, and I was doing a bunch of building. It started. I was working on some Pilates studios. Was trying to raise money to do some car wash stuff. Was trying to do some stuff in Orange Theory. So everything was kind of in and around these kind of multi-site, for the most part, health and wellness concepts. And when the opportunity basically kind of came to, kind of build out the practice at Houlihan, the skill set was extremely relevant.
And so you mentioned, because you were an operator, I mean, you were the
CFO
and CEO of a Pilates chain. And I mean, I think that's got to make a difference. I found it to make a difference when I would speak to you, because, tell me how that affects your clients and the changes the way that you advise owners and what you do.
Yeah. So actually, I mean, today, I am the owner of a number of different Pilates chains, primarily on the West Coast. I've been involved in the Pilates category for the last 13 years. So I might even be 14 years. So really a long time, and kind of got into that category by luck. And for, I would say, I don't know, 11 of the last 14 years, it was kind of I don't want to say it was an overlooked category, but it wasn't the hot category. And so, if you were a really good operator, if you were just an okay operator and you had good real estate, kind of everything went up and to the right, for every single year. Obviously that's changed recently, which we can talk about. But look, I think the ability, there's a difference between understanding things on pieces of paper, right, versus actually what I always say, pressing the button, and spending time in the point of sale system and setting up the pricing options, and dealing with customer complaints and clicking this and clicking that, and understanding how the data pulls, all those trials and tribulations and frustrations. That's what allows you to really connect with kind of the founder, entrepreneur on the other end, right, who might be a potential client. And it also allows you to really understand the numbers on a deeper level versus just seeing, growth of 5% or, understanding the underlying drivers and, how operations really dictate, right, the result of those numbers. That's what that experience gives you. And it's been great for me in terms of the practice that I've built.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's talk about key trends right now in your world. You talked about some of this stuff on stage at the HFA show. As you had mentioned previously, I've heard you say this, and I don't think I don't think refutable. 2025 was arguably the biggest M&A year ever in fitness. Tell me your thoughts about that. What's driving it? Do you think it's going to continue?
Yeah. Look, I think it's a couple things. I think COVID was a big wake up call, as we all know, around people's health. It forced people to really look internally and to be more proactive about their health, especially when millions of people were kind of dying around the world, um, you know, due to the this whatever virus, right, that was primarily attacking people that might have had pre-existing conditions, or that were obese, and so I think COVID really spurred a lot of people into action, and I think the result of that is what we're seeing is the gym, or exercise, fitness, however you want to define it, is now becoming no different than breathing air or paying rent, or paying your mortgage. You have to eat, right? You have to sleep, you have to pay your bills, and you have to go to the gym. And I think it's becoming more and more of an essential service. And we're particularly seeing that when we dissect data amongst our clients, we're seeing that kind of greatest jump in the younger cohorts, right? So the Gen Zs, and the millennials, but even more the Gen Zs, are the ones that are really kind of driving LTV and new joins, right, amongst all these concepts that are growing like weeds.
Yeah, that's right. And you've also commented on HVLP and now this HVLP 2.0, this kind of premium value. Describe for the audience, what is that shift, and tell us what people think about it right now.
Yeah, look, I think that the consumer is discerning. I think that there's obviously you have the great successes that have been Planet Fitness, right? Kind of getting in at that original now $15 price point where you get all the basics. But I think consumers are in this day and age, they're willing to pay slightly more, right? A little bit more to get a lot more. And there's a lot of really innovative concepts out there, like for example, like a Mountainside Fitness, right, who I think has really pioneered the premium value model, where they try and pack as much value into the box as possible for as cheap of a price as possible. And I think look, consumers love that. And I always talk about, and not to talk poorly about any concepts, but look, as an example, I live here in New York City, and Equinox is kind of on all the different corners, and you go in, the concept hasn't changed for the last whatever 10 or 15 years. It looks the same as offering, the price just keeps going up, and for $300 you can be an Equinox member. It's unfortunate that we don't have more concepts in a place like New York City where for $40 you can go to a Mountainside or a Choose, right, or a Vasa, or some of these more 2.0 or premium value concepts. And so I actually think that we're now starting to see in New York City specifically a bunch of these single location gyms that have caught on to that. And they're starting to eat the lunch of some of these more established players at higher price points.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true. Now, since you have your roots in Pilates, and we've seen what's going on in that world right now. Where do strength training, Pilates, and wellness modalities, how are they fitting into the deal pipeline? I mean, I know Meriwether's out there doing a lot of great things, and the operator side, there's a lot going on. I mean, what are you seeing in the modalities and how they're impacting deal flow?
Yeah, I think so. I'll kind of comment on those individually. So the Pilates market, is obviously just been on fire,
Yeah.
and there's been some really phenomenal successes, and I think that there's a lot of white space to be had in that market. Um, you know, in any market, when people smell opportunity, ultimately what happens is a lot of investment into the category, and you have the obviously potential for for overbuilding and saturation, and then ultimately the question is who's going to have the staying power, right, to stay around, and who's going to offer the best experience. But I think within boutique, I think pretty much all the categories outside of Pilates and strength training are extremely challenging. Um, you know, you have some concepts that are just, and I talked about this at HFA. They're very niche, and they're really difficult to get people to pay a recurring membership where they're going to go, 3, 4 times a week. Things like boxing, things like cycling, um, some of these, I don't want to say hit concepts, some hit concepts individually, but and so I think that part of the market is it's challenging. I think Pilates has really grown because it attacks a lot of different things while also at the same time being low impact, right? And being able to kind of maintain your joints. And so a lot of these concepts, whether you're talking about traditional Pilates, whether you're talking about more athletic inspired modern Pilates, can kind of give you everything that you're looking for in terms of strength, flexibility, cardio, and toning, and do it in a low impact manner. I think that's really resonating with the consumer. Obviously, it's been primarily women, but we're seeing a lot more men that are starting to come into the space. I think historically it's been for better or worse, there's definitely been a stigma around, oh, this is only for women, right? But it's not, right? Like, we're all human beings. We all have to move our bodies in the same way, and so I think people are really catching on to that.
Yeah.
And then look, in terms of strength, a lot of what I'm seeing are just these really super innovative, kind of semi-private strength training concepts, where that are really kind of hitting on the value proposition. We talked about the value proposition of kind of 2.0 or premium value. We talked about the big box gym space, but I'm now seeing it as it relates to kind of let's call it semi-private versus boutique group classes and versus individual private training. Concepts, for example, that maybe there's 4 people in a cohort, in a group. The pricing, instead of it being $150 per session, and you're talking half the time to the personal trainer, is $50. You're building community and going with your cohort, right? It's very different going with 4 people versus going alone or being in a class of 30 people where you're just a number. And I'm seeing the efficacy and the LTV of kind of that particular subsegment just absolutely off the charts. So, some of the best I've ever seen. So I think there's some cool concepts that are doing some great things, and so I'm pretty bullish on that category as well. But it is in its infancy, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. Alloy Personal Training, we've handled some of their marketing for them. They've done a great job at that. They've recently did a transaction, and then our friend over at Luke over at Discover Strength. I mean, there's several of these kind of concepts that are really worth looking at. I agree with you. It's kind of another era of strength in that regard with Discover. Very curious concept.
For sure, yeah. Luke's awesome. I got to spend some time with him at HFA, and there's a great concept that I go to personally in New York City called the Fort, which really kind of hits on that 4-person recurring model piece. Here's your slot, focused on strength training, compound lifts, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, very curious stuff. So let's move on to technology, Jeremy. The pandemic pushed a lot of people into hybrid, workout patterns. The hybrid dynamic of people working outside the facility and inside and at home in different places. What do you see the impact of that in changing the fitness businesses in general? And what does that look like to you?
I'm not particularly bullish on that category of kind of at home. I think, as far as you've heard it, you've seen it, right? As the CEO of a equipment company, look, I think there was a place for it when everyone was at home, and I think now it's a nice to have discretionary income type of thing where maybe if I'm working from home from a day and I want to get a workout in, it's great. And obviously for those people that don't like to be around other people, all good, and you can kind of work out on your own. But look, I think there's a place for it, but in a much more minor manner than kind of what it was. And so the question really is like, what is that normalized market sizing, right? And like, what is that normalized market demand? I'm not really sure yet, but I think everything I'm seeing is, for the most part, like most things in life, generally speaking, people want to be, around other people. They want to be in the studio. They want to be in gym. They want to get out of the house, right? a lot of people use the gym as their third space, and so I think it's a nice complement, but it's supplementary. It's not primary.
Yeah, no, that's right. And with tech, when you're looking at some of these transactions, what, in these businesses, how is the tech stack, changing? What do you see implications? Because, as you know, some of that technology is kind of dated. Maybe it's a little legacy heavy. I mean, with some of these brands you're seeing, do you see any significant departures or new ways of approaching their basic CRMs or their kind of tech stack in general, or do you still see it being largely the same?
I see it kind of all over the place. I think
Yeah,
that there's a lot of legacy gym operators that, they've got good brands and they've kind of been in a, captive market for some period of time. And so for a lot of them, there's not as much incentive to,
right,
invest right in the tech stack.
right,
Um, but I think that for a lot of the forward-thinking people, you know, hey, spending the extra money to have a data warehouse, a data lake, right? So you can actually, utilize that data, understand what's going on.
right,
Um, investing some real dollars in your app to improve the entire experience, so people can seamlessly go on and book a group class or book a personal training session or understand what's happening in that gym ecosystem. I mean, that kind of like cons- uh, consumer friction, removing as much friction as possible through technology. That's where you're going to get higher NPS scores.
yeah,
And I think in terms of the CRM and membership models, I think look, at least from my world in terms of how people are looking at things, people want to see that there's the technology in place and the team in place that's knows how to use that CRM technology so that they're constantly talking to leads, they're tracking conversion, they're understanding what works, what doesn't work, why leads are not converting, how marketing programs are working. And so, you know, a lot of people get away with, kind of doing it. I don't want to say half-assed, but I'm
yeah,
saying, half-assed.
yeah.
But I think in a market that's continually becoming more competitive, you got to invest in those tools, and because other people are going to be willing to do it, and that's when your lunch starts to get eaten.
Yeah, no, you have to understand the core aspects and KPIs of your business, and if you don't have those tools in place to manage those things the right way, you're going to be up a creek without a paddle, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And
So
I don't want to get out of the boat.
yeah, no, me either. So I always like to ask guests like you a little bit about pearls of wisdom because we have a lot of listeners around the world that come from different perspectives, CEOs, owners, on the supply and the supply side and the operator side. So, what are the things, or what are the lessons in your years in the space and what you're doing now that owners and management teams should really be thinking about regarding their businesses and what they need to be contemplating for their futures right now? What are some of the things that you really would emphasize to those folks?
Yeah, it's a couple things. I think it's primarily, look, data is the key to unlocking value.
Yeah,
And it's easy to say. I'm sure a lot of owners, operators think that they have what they need from their P&Ls, but oftentimes, most of the time, I find that that's not the case. And when you are trying to create an economic benefit for yourself, engaging in some sort of sale process or liquidity process, um, the universe of investors is going to dissect your business across every metric possible. And if you can't deliver those metrics, that's not a good representation to the market. It doesn't instill confidence in them, and it doesn't give them the confidence that they need to say, hey, these guys really know what they're doing, or they really understand what's going on with their business. So investing in the data now to understand, the 20 KPIs or whatever the number is, right?
right.
Um, that's key and critical, and obviously making sure that your P&Ls are set up correctly. Your chart of accounts, such that you can really understand the trends in your business, and making sure the details there. So that's what I would say is the first thing. The second thing is, um, a lot of people get into the habit of, hey, I want to open new clubs and spend capex on new clubs at the, at the risk of not investing in their legacy clubs, and that's a really dangerous game. It's a
Yeah.
really dangerous game. It's addicting, right? Everyone wants to open new. That's fun. That's exciting. But if you neglect the legacy and you don't continue to maintain and invest and innovate that, you're going to see a drop off in your customer base, because people, in the fitness industry, in the category, they're very fickle. And if someone opens up 5 minutes from you, 10 minutes from you, brand spanking new,
Yeah.
what do you think is going to happen? Happens all the time.
Yep.
So you have to continually reinvest. You have to continue to innovate. You have to continue to make your members feel like the experience that they're getting is relevant. Otherwise, they're going to churn. And we've seen case studies on it, and we've looked at the numbers, and a lot of people where we've done competitor impact analysis, right? And it's very clear. So that's what I would say is the other kind of big piece of advice.
Yeah, that's good insights. And having gone through a process with you all before, you better have your data ready.
That's right. That's right. As I said at HFA, no data, no deal.
That's right. That's right. It's the truth.
No data,
That's
no
just.
deal.
It seems so logical and rational, but a lot of folks, until they're in it, they don't really appreciate sometimes how important it truly is. So.
Yeah, and I'm amazed how many people, entrepreneurs, can grow a business, run a business on feel.
Yep.
Yeah. And a lot of people can get it to a certain place, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's a great lifestyle business, and maybe you're happy with that. There's no hard and fast rule that you need to do it this way or you need to have this. But in terms of the topics that you and I are talking about, right?
Yeah.
That folks are hopefully interested in to creating liquidity for themselves. It's a key differentiator between because people are going to view you as a lifestyle business, and they're going to have to do the work. Guess what? You're going to get a lifestyle multiple, and a lifestyle multiple is very different, right, than a premium multiple.
Yeah, all true. Well, listen, Jeremy, for the listeners, we'll have your LinkedIn profile, et cetera, and in the show notes, along with some details on your big event every year in New York in May, your One Houlihan Lokey event, which is fantastic. I really encourage anybody who's in the marketplace for some good quality advice on the future of their business to reach out to Jeremy. Jeremy, it's fantastic to see you. I hope you have a great rest of the summer, and we'll see you around the circuit in the coming weeks and months, brother.
Always a pleasure. Have just an immense amount of respect for you and everything you've done and accomplished and how you go about things. So as I said, I'm humbled and honored to be invited to the show and participate, and I'd love to come back.
All right, my friend. I appreciate that very much. We'll see you soon.